Good day, everyone. This is Pastor Theo, aka Dr. Theo, aka Professor Theo, aka Just Theo. And I'm shooting this video in conjunction with two things. Maundy, Thursday, which is a part of Holy Week that not a lot of people celebrate. And also the Good Shepherd series that I've been preaching in our church probably like the last 6 or 7 weeks. And so I'm combining these two things. One thing I've been doing is I've been looking at this Good Shepherd series is I'm tying that into some other traditional messages, including Good Friday and the Resurrection Sunday this Sunday. And so today we're going to be looking at Maundy, Thursday, which was the Thursday right before Good Friday. This is when Jesus is, for all intents and purposes, getting all his affairs in order. Having the Last Supper, washing the disciples' feet, giving them a new commandment, praying for himself, the disciples, and other believers. All these things took place on Maundy, Thursday. And like I say, I want to tie these into this grander narrative of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, us as his sheep. So we're going to be looking at several passages as we connect these dots. The first passage we're going to look at is a reminder. This is a passage I've used recently as I've been preaching about Jesus as the Good Shepherd. And this is found in the book of John. The book of John, chapter 10. So the book of John, chapter 10, and we're going to be looking at verses 11 through 30. I'm not going to break all this down. There's messages online that you can see when I talk about these, but I do want to connect some dots. Jesus is already claimed to be the true shepherd, and he says that anyone who comes in not by the door is a thief and a robber. He goes on to say that he is the door, and he lays down his life for the sheep. And that's where we're going to be picking it up. Chapter 10, verse 11 of John, it says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. That is very important. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. But a hireling, he who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and does not care about the sheep. But Jesus contrasts himself, saying, I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and I am known by them. So the good shepherd lays down his life. The good shepherd knows his sheep, and the sheep knows their shepherd. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep, and other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them I must also bring, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. And this, just as a reminder, this is Jesus prophesying that this initial flock, his primary flock, first off, is to the lost sheep of Israel. But he says there's another flock that's going to get combined into one flock, and that other flock would be any who would come after, primarily Gentiles, but those in the future, whomever will believe on him, are also his sheep, and they will be engrafted into this one flock. And he says, therefore my Father loves me because I lay my life down. So this is the third time he talks about laying his life down. This is very important. That I may take it up again, which he does on the third day, we're going to see. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. This is a willful, intentional, purposeful, voluntary submission to the Father's will as he lays down his life. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it up again. So he does not need to depend upon someone else's power in terms of determining his death, nor does he need to depend upon someone else's power in terms of his resurrection. He has that power in and of himself. And he says, this command I have received from my Father. And so the Father wills that the Son would give his life. But then we will read in the Garden of Gethsemane that the Father who wills this, the Son then submits his will to the will of the Father. And this is important, that this is a command that you're going to demonstrate your love. So Christ, we read that while we were yet sinners, while we were enemies of God, while we were weak, while we were against God, it was at our lowest point. That is when God sends his only begotten Son, not based upon God being angry, not based upon God's wrath, but based upon God's love for us. He sends his Son to die for us. So it is that love that motivates the Son, aka the Good Shepherd, to die for the sheep. That's going to be very important. And he says, therefore, there was division again among the Jews because of these sayings, and many of them said, he has a demon and is mad. Why do you listen to him? Others says, these are not the words of one who has a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? Then we read, now it was at the feast of dedication in Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. Then the Jews surrounded him and said to him, how long do you keep us in doubt? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly. This is important. They do not recognize who Jesus is. And he's going to be very clear on why they do not recognize him in terms of who he is. He has not come out directly and says, I am he. I am the one that you've been waiting for. But he has dropped a lot of hints, and he has connected himself to certain prophecies and certain Old Testament scriptures that would imply that he is claiming to be God. Yet there are some who aren't getting it, and we're going to see clearly why they do not get it. He answers them and I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness to me, but you do not believe because you are not my sheep. And I said to you, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. So he says, I've been speaking as clearly as I need to speak, but more importantly, don't just look at what I've been communicating, look at what I've been demonstrating. These works, these healings, these deliverances, how I have loved, how I have lived a life according to the scriptures and the law, how I have been righteous, how I have found favor in God's eyes, how I have done all the things that I've set out to do based upon my Father's will. I did those things. Yet you did not recognize what was happening because you are not my sheep. My sheep know me. My sheep hear my voice, so they would recognize who I am. And the fact that you don't recognize who I am is par for the course for all those who do not belong to me. Ouch. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me, and I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, so the Father gives these sheep to the Son. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and the Father are one. So they are simultaneously in Jesus' hand as well as the Father's hand. They belong to the Father gave them to the Son, but they never cease belonging to the Father. So now the sheep belong to both the Father and the Son, and they're in both of their hands. And we read that no one can snatch them out of the Son's hand, and no one can snatch them out of the Father's hands. That's the backdrop. Let's talk about some things for Maundy, Thursday. We hear a lot about Good Friday, but we're going to hear some things about Maundy, Thursday, some things that Jesus was doing as he was preparing to be arrested, which would lead to his crucifixion. In chapter 13 of this same book, so same book of John, in verses 1 through 17, there's a familiar story. I'm not going to go over it. I preached it in the past. When Jesus is washing his disciples' feet, and he encourages them to wash each other's feet. And he says that, and then Peter says, well, if you're going to wash my feet, why don't you just wash me from head to toe? And Jesus says, well, you've already been made clean. And for the one who's already been made clean, there's only need to wash their feet, because traditionally as they would travel, they would have sandals on or sometimes barefoot. So they would go from town to town or from one place to another place, and you would just have to wash the feet in order to be clean. But he says, not all of you are clean. And he alludes to the fact that Judas, the betrayer, was not clean. Then when we combine these texts with other stories, whether it's in Luke or Mark, we'll know that an argument pursues after Jesus talks about his betrayer. And he says, one of you are going to betray me, and then they get into an argument about who it is, and that argument turns into who is the greatest among them. Well, we want to pick it up in John chapter 13, verse 31. This is when Jesus gives this new command, because remember we already had the 10 commandments. Then we were told that the greatest commandment was love your God with all your mind, your heart, your body, your everything. And then one that was like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And upon these does all the law fall. And so there's a new commandment he gives them. You remember, here's someone who was on his way to being arrested, to being brutally murdered, yet he is still preparing the sheep. He's still getting his affairs in order. And one of the things that he's getting in order is to making sure that the sheep have a clear understanding of who he is, what he's about to do, and what they are and what they're supposed to be doing. So he gives this new commandment in chapter 13, verse 31 going on. It says, so when he, being Jesus, had gone out, well, he being Judas, had gone out, this is after Jesus said that you're going to betray me, Judas departs. So Jesus is now with the remaining 11. And Jesus says, now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and glorify him immediately. He's speaking about his pending death and resurrection. Little children, I shall be with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, where I am going, you cannot come. So now I say to you, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. As I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. So Jesus, having already instructed, letting all know that the two greatest commandments, love God with all that you have, love your neighbors as yourself, now gives this new commandment to just love one another. He is driving home that point. Love one another the same way that I have loved you. So, in what way did he love his disciples? In what way did he love his sheep? In what way does he love us? Well, he made it clear in chapter 10 that because of the relationship he has with the sheep as a good shepherd, he not only cares for, protects, nurtures, but he also lays his life down for the sheep. So that's a different level of love. We're talking about loving to the point that you're willing to lay down your life. You may say, well, how do we know that we're supposed to love to that extent? How do we know that that's what he's implying? Well, this new commandment he gives, the Latin mandatum novum, he expounds upon this new commandment in chapter 15. So in chapter 13, he says, love one another as I have loved you, that you should also love one another, and that people would know that you belong to me, and we know his sheep belong to him. He says, they'll know that you are my sheep by the love that you have for one another. In John chapter 15, and in verse 13, well, let's go to verse 11. Jesus says, these things I have spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. So where did we just read that? We just read that back in John chapter 13. So we know that whatever he's going to say right now is tied to what he said in John chapter 13, because he says verbatim, love one another as I have loved you. The very next verse, which is verse 13, says, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. So he's saying, because you're my friends, I'm willing to lay my life down for you, because there's no greater love than to do that. And he just told them to love one another the way that I loved you. So when we connect those two, he's also saying that this new commandment for you is to love each other and to be willing to lay down your lives for each other. Now, does that necessarily mean that you're going to go to the cross and be crucified? No. Does it necessarily mean that you literally die? No. But are we willing to die to self? That's what he's saying with the sheep. We've already read lots of Old Testament passages. If you go back and look at different videos I've shot or messages I've preached, where we saw that you had these bad shepherds who were all about themselves. They weren't willing to do anything for the sheep. They were all about themselves. But we also read that there were some bad sheep who would bully other sheep who would take advantage of other sheep. Now he's letting the sheep know, not only is the shepherd willing to lay down my life for you because you are my friends, there is going to be a level of love that's going to mark that you belong to me. And that level of love is marked by that self-sacrifice. Because it says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. So we need to love one another the same way that he loved us, and we clearly see that he loves us to the point that he's willing to lay down his life. No greater love than this, who's willing to lay down one's life for his friends. So what we see, this new commandment is uniquely tied to this greater narrative of Good Shepherd. He is a good shepherd who is making sure that he has the sheep in order before he moves on. And he gives them this new commandment that as sheep, they're supposed to love each other in a new, more profound, sacrificial way. And lastly, we're going to continue as Jesus shifts to a time of prayer. And this is found in the book of John also, chapter 17. In verses 1 through 5, Jesus prays for himself. But I want to really focus on when he begins to shift his focus to prayer on the disciples as well as on the rest of the world. Start in verse 6. John 17:6, it says, I have manifested your name to the men whom you have given me out of the world. So he's praying to the Father. And the Son says, I have manifested, I have revealed, I have glorified your name to the men whom you have given me. Well, who did the Father give to the Son? We just clearly read that the Father gives the sheep to the Son. And now the sheep belong to both the Father and the Son, and the sheep are in the Son's hands as well as in the Father's hands. And he's reiterating this in a different way. He says, I am now going to pray for these disciples. I'm going to pray for these apostles. I'm going to pray for these ones who you've entrusted me with, the ones that you've given me, aka these sheep. And it says, you have given me them out of the world. They are yours. You gave them to me, and they have kept your word. In other words, they hear your voice. They recognize who you are. If we are going to say that we're sheep, anyone who's going to claim to be sheep, part of that is going to be the love that we have for God, the love that we have for one another, and the fact that we know him and hear his voice, which means we recognize and obey his word. Now they have known that all things which you have given me are from you. For I have given to them the words which you have given me. And they have received them, and have known surely that I come from you, and they have believed that you sent me. And the reason why they believe is because they are sheep. I pray for them. I do not pray for the world, but for those whom you have given me. He keeps reiterating, these are the ones that the Father gave the Son. And we know that the Father gave the Son these sheep. For they are yours, and all are mine are yours, and yours are mine. And I am glorified in them. Now I am no longer in the world, but these are in the world, and I come to you. Holy Father, keep through your name those who you have given me. In other words, do not allow them to be snatched from my hands, and do not allow for them to be snatched from your hands, that they may be one as we are. While I was with them in the world, I kept them in your name. Those whom you gave me, I have kept. Because he says, not one will be lost. And none of them is lost except the son of perdition, which is Judas, who was not found but then lost, because we know that he was never found and then lost, because when Peter says, clean me, Christ says, you are already clean, all except with one, who is not clean, referring to Judas. So it's not like Judas was clean but then got dirty. No, he was never clean. He is the son of perdition, that the scripture might be filled. But now I come to you, and these things I speak in the world, that they may have my joy fulfilled in themselves. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from the evil one. In other words, that you should do what a good shepherd does. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I also send them into the world. As for their sakes, I sanctify myself, as they also may be sanctified by the truth. And we read that they were sent into the world as sheep amongst wolves, sheep for the slaughter. He goes on and starts to pray for all believers. And once again, remember, he had already said back in John earlier that you are of a flock, but there is another flock that I must also bring to myself, and I'm going to make one flock. And he now prays for those Gentiles, those who will be of this other flock. And it says, I do not pray for these alone. In other words, I do not pray for this flock alone, but also for this other flock who will believe in me through their word. And they all may be one, because remember he said it's going to become one flock, as you Father, are in me, and I am in you, they also may be in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. And glory which you gave me, I have given them, that they may be one, just as we are one. I in them, and you in me. And they may be made perfect in one, that the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them as you have loved me. And he says, how would the world know? By that love that they have for each other. And what type of love is that? No greater love than to lay down your life for another. Father, I desire that they also whom you gave me may be with me where I am, that they may behold my glory which you have given me. For you loved me before the foundation of the world. O righteous Father, the world has not known you, and the world can't know him because they're not his sheep. But I have known you, and these have known that you sent me because they are his sheep. And I have declared to them your name, and I will declare it, that the love which you loved me may be in them, and I in them. So here you have the Savior of the world about to be served up, sold out, betrayed by Judas, arrested, brutally beaten, murdered, state-sanctioned crucifixion, all of these things, sheep scattered, sheep fleeing. Yet on the way out, he is still doing the very things that he was sent to do, which is to reclaim lost sheep. He is a good shepherd. He is being faced with the prospect of death. A hireling would flee. A hireling would leave the sheep to their own devices, and the sheep would be scattered. But Jesus is not a hireling. He does not flee. He does not run away. He does not shirk his responsibility. He doubles down on the fact that he is who he said he is, which is the good shepherd, and he is willing to lay down his life for his sheep. And he says, hey, sheep, the same way I am communicating and the same way I am demonstrating, I am also now mandating this new command to you, mandatum novum, this new command that you would love one another the same way I love you, and the same way I loved you, love one another. And then later on says the same thing, but then follows it up by saying, no greater love than that of a brother or a friend or another, to lay down them lives for those who they are around. They're other brothers and sisters, other sheep. We cannot be sheep who only think about ourselves. We must be sheep who think about, first and foremost, the good shepherd, but also the sheep that are also in the flock. This is some great stuff, y'all. All this he's doing, with all the heaviness, the weight of the world, the prospect of murder, the prospect of betrayal, all these things hanging over his head, and yet he still makes sure that the sheep are being cared for. That sounds like a good shepherd to me. We're going to continue this, unfortunately not on video, but there will be a live stream Good Friday as we look at how the shepherd gets struck and how the sheep scatter. But then, lo and behold, we're going to focus on resurrection of the Good Shepherd. Once again, this has been Pastor Theo, a.k.a. Dr. Theo, a.k.a. Professor Theo, a.k.a. Just Theo, with this message on Mondays, Thursday. I pray and I hope it's been a blessing to you. Be blessed as we continue to focus in on this Holy Week, as we reflect on who our Savior is and what he has done for us, who our Good Shepherd is and what we should do now as his sheep. Take care and God bless.